So I am here now with Carlos Gallegos. Carlos is one of our partners based in Costa Rica. Actually, we are not only partners, business partners, we are already friends. I loved to stay some days with Carlos and other strategists in Norway in an advanced training with our CEO and founder, Chris Rangin. And now we came to this, to this coronavirus situation, and we are speaking with many of our global partners trying to figure out how is this next chapter of not only our economy, but our world, our lifestyle, maybe. I would like to welcome you, Carlos, to this interview.
Thank you, Tiago. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Nice. For those who doesn't know you, it's important to say that Carlos is a quite experienced guy with most 35 years working in professional services firms, including the so-called big four companies. And well, Carlos, let's begin as I like with the most difficult question. What do you see that is coming? What is your general image for this next chapter of our lives?
Okay, that's a tough question, Tiago. I'd like to start probably saying that I think no one has a clear understanding of how our future is going to be changed. I mean, it's like if the dust is just settling down, most countries are starting to get back to whatever was called normal, but we're still in the process of discovering what that represents. I think there are going to be different chapters. I think the first chapter of the crisis, the pandemic itself, is not over. I mean, it's going to be with us for some months, if not years. Some experts are saying that this is going to take until 2022. So in that process, Tiago, I think that what's clear to me is something I heard from someone which I think is very relevant. He said, our lives have changed so dramatically that we need to create a new way of doing things. Let me start by saying that we used to have three different roles, more or less. I mean, I'm trying to simplify it, but we had our home. I mean, our space for family reunion, for leisure. That's where we spend a lot of the time, where we spend nights, we get ready. And we went to two different roles. One was our work, regardless of how much you had to travel, it was a different environment, mostly. I know a lot of people did teleworking, but most people would go to a different place, a different setup, a different atmosphere. And a third world, which was our entertainment. I mean, where we would go to the theater, we would go to a concert, we would meet with friends or the extended family. And we had three different set of places where we would spend most of our time. That has changed. Of course, during the quarantine, we were forced to stay in-house, and we did all the three things in one space. But I think that's going to keep with us for the future. I mean, we are seeing a superimposition of the three spaces into one. We will work from home and we will study from home even longer than we used to be. Probably not as intensive as we have experienced it during these 6, 7, 8 weeks. But I see that in our mind, in our way of relating with others, most people have learned a different way of doing it. And it has its advantages, and it has its disadvantages. I mean, and you could go into physical, psychological. There is a lot of implications. But just answering your question, there is this big change. I mean, we don't have free spaces. We have one extended space, and we would go out, and it would depend country by country and probably county by county, depending on some conditions. I think the virus is going to stay with us for a long time, and we would probably go back, relax some restrictions, and then be obligated again to get into the houses. So implications for our consumption, our spending, and how we produce as companies is going to be changed in a big way. Let's take that supply, for example. I think we're going to see a tremendous difference in how companies manage their supply chain. Up to now, efficiency and cost reduction was probably the main driver, right? I mean, you would set up some of your factories or your operations in a place where you could source the most efficiently. That's going to change, I think. I think American companies and European companies are going to change. They're going to start depending less into China, and they're going to start spreading their centers of operations throughout the world. It would depend. And I want to mention that, Tiago, because I see an opportunity here for some countries in America.
Yeah, interesting. Very
in America,
interesting.
for example. I think there is, because efficiency is not going to be enough. I mean, of course, cost consciousness is going to be important, but have different places where you can source are going to be critical. In Engaging Innovate, we talk about transformation, right? It's going to be a tremendous opportunity, tremendous, because new rules are going to be set, new markets are going to be defined, new players are going to come into place. There are going to be, of course, some losers, and there is always space for winners. I know this is unprecedented. We never experienced a crisis, especially, I mean, you are very young, Tiago, but they say it's the worst crisis in 38 years. But I think we would recover. I think we would, as a society, we would find new ways of doing it. That was I took the example of the supply. If you take demand, I think that's going to be hard to predict. I think that people will be very cautious at the beginning on how they spend their money. I think that entertainment, food would be increased once, but not much. I mean, you eat 3 meals a day, whether you are home or whether you are traveling or whether you are out with friends. Probably you would drink more, I don't know, alcohol or some beverage, whatever. Probably, but there is a limited number of consumption that we could do as. So before the crisis, Tiago, I used to use this concept that was the aggregation of demand and the aggregation of supply. And we had examples of companies that did it greatly, like Airbnb or Uber. I would expect new kinds of aggregation of supply and demand. I don't know who's going to be the players, but I anticipate new players would jump into that.
Oh, it's you bring all together so many interesting points, Carlos. But I would like to take this last one, because I was um, curiously, I was reading a content by the London School of Economics that was exactly addressing the question of the supply demand question, comparing, for example, our actual crisis with the 2008 crisis, for example, and they were telling the difference through these lenses. And the first shock was, of course, on the demand, but they say that they are worried about the sequence because the shock on demand causes a shock on supply, and this can become some during processing, and it can destroy value during the next months. And we are already seeing it through these projections. For example, International Monetary Fund is projecting a downturn in, I think, 5 or 6% to the whole world this year. So this supply and demand question is something that I was these days reflecting on. But as you said, there is always the losers and the winners, and there is always hidden opportunities for everybody. You mentioned it as well, the transformation, and for sure we at Engage Innovate and at Strategy Tools, we love to work with companies in order to help these companies in their business transformation process. And I think that this new normal is the right environment for those companies that are already, we can use the term we like most, anti-fragile, resilient company. We used to take the transformational company in Strategy Tools. Anyway, what do you think? How prepared are the leading executives in let's say in the biggest companies, because incumbents, corporates, they are normally slow in taking actions. We have some good examples. For example, Danone is a good example that everybody is speaking about. But quite often we see this problem, the difference between a startup speed and the corporate speed. And how do you see the incumbents going through this necessary transformation?
Let me start by saying that in my 35 years as a consultant, I've done some work in business continuity. Business continuity was always something hard to sell from the consultant point of view, because normally executives would think of two extreme scenarios, Tiago. One would be nothing would happen to me, I would be okay, I've been in business for so many years, so why would I need to spend any money getting ready if nothing has happened to me? That was one extreme. The other extreme was it would be the end of the world, everyone would be down, it would be something like we're experiencing. I mean, unimaginable. I mean, it was something so strange that it was actually just used as an excuse. I mean, there would be some size of catastrophe that would force all the companies to lock down and close. And so why do I have to worry? Because it would be a complete disaster. The crises have taught us that even in a crisis this size, it's up to the companies individually to recover. I mean, you could get help from the government, you could get bailout, you could get loans, whatever, but it's up to each and every single company to be ready to recover. And of course, in a crisis like this, some companies were already out of their initial journey, let's say. They have lost their way. they have gained weight. They were probably not as efficient as they should have been. And it's much harder for them to get back into the game uh, that for some other companies that even though they had to close down, they could be ready. Uh, this is assuming, of course, that the demand is going to be there because you could be ready. You could have your materials and your lines of production, but if there is no demand for your product or for your service, you are in a bad shape, right? So uh, in strategy tools, we have this concept of your balanced portfolio, your present, your growth, and your explore or your future debt business. And we talk about not products, but we talk about business models because it's actually the business models that would allow you to produce either services or goods. So uh, I think that it's very important that the companies now realize how important is for them to manage those three set of conditions. I mean, they need to manage their present. I mean, in the crisis, of course, that's get back to business, that's protect their cash and start producing new cash. You know, most companies have been spending and they are not receiving the revenues. So they have to fix that. It's going to take time. I'm not an expert on economics, but I could probably tell you that it's going to be different for different companies. Airlines is probably going to take some time. Some other industries could do it sooner. So an additional complication that we have here, Tiago, is that what we used to call the convergence of industry, it was well underway. I mean, convergence was you no longer compete in one specific industry. Using the term of Rita McCrath, we compete in arenas, and arenas is much more complicated. You are competing with different companies, technology, transportation, insurance. You're not aligned. I mean, it's not enough to be the best in your own. Now you have to compete and cooperate with others. And I think that brings me to what I would think is going to be the next big change. I would foresee a much more greater cooperation moving forward. Again, in strategy tools, from the beginning, we have established a set of relationships. We talk about corporate business strategy, but we have always realized the importance that the ecosystem has in any one given company. We have said that no matter how large or how important you are, you need some other players in the ecosystem in order to survive and be a winner. So I think this crisis is catalyzing, of course, the technology. I mean, I haven't talked, you know, I mean, the ability to telecomputing or teleworking, of course, is there. But I foresee also a change in the mindset. I might be wrong, Tiago, but I think companies are going to realize that they have to play a much broader game.
Yeah. Well, you brought two concepts that are worth for us, which is the balancing, the business model balancing, exploit and explore, the so-called ambidextrous organization, and also speaking about the cooperation, which you mentioned as the next big change. I remember the concept that we have at Strategy Tools, that is the how to master ecosystems.
Yeah.
This is quite interesting. Should we call it, how daring we are, but should we call it the next normal, or should we call it the new normal of the management priority to handle the complex, and I am using the word complex as it is technically, I mean, tied together, many different parts tied together, is the mastering new ecosystems one of the main competitive advantages that we are going to face to the winners, the winners in the corporate world?
Yeah. And there's still one element. I mean, I talk about ecosystem, but I did not specifically talk about startups. Startups are going to have a hard time because capital is not jumping into financing these different companies. I think that in what you call the new normal, startups are going to be playing a much more important role. For one simple reason, because they don't have a big established base, and they have the need to grow and the need to start making money. They're going to be the ones that are going to be injecting most of the innovation into the new normal. I think that's why it's important for governments all across the world to keep some kind of, I don't know how to call it, safe net. And I know it sounds contradictory because you need the startups to go through the life cycle of starting and not making it, because that's how the ecosystem as a whole refreshes. But I would foresee that the companies, the smart companies, will do things that are not that new, but they would do that in a different way. First, what you just mentioned, the ambidextrous organization. The term could be changed, but it's the same concept. Is you have to manage the present and the future, and you need different skills in order to do that. As a matter of fact, even during the crisis, I have been recommending clients that they use two different teams. One to face the crisis today, and the other one who would still be thinking on how are we going to be making money 3 years from now. So startups should play a part in the game, in the sense that they would probably come with the brightest, most refreshing ideas to face this new normal, as you have called it, Tiago. Now, the question, this is the hard question, is how are they going to be financed and sustained? And I don't have an answer for that, because the other demand for resources is people who lost their jobs in established companies, and they don't have income. So most of the money from governments are going directly to those people, so they can survive. They can buy food, and they can pay some basic bills. So where is the money to help the startups? I don't see it as I think we would expect it. What could happen is that we would have a kind of a dormant phase, and as we start getting back into recovery, then we would see these startups or new ones jump and start having a much more important role. But that's an interesting perspective, Tiago.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I would like to take the opportunity to ask you something about international trade, because I know that you have worked across several countries, and this issue about globalization, maybe a downturn in globalization in the next 12 months, or maybe more than that. There is, of course, this United States and China commercial war the last year. Now we have the oil prices war. But anyway, the supply chain itself, both the airlines and all the logistics in macro and in microeconomy. But looking ahead, shall we face a different pace, or maybe a go back in globalization?
Oh, well, that's you are asking tough questions, Tiago, today. I mean, as you said, we already had a trade war. And I think the crisis, and what, based on what you've seen on the news, I mean, the United States is not happy. I think they made their own mistakes, very bad mistakes. But they're not happy, and they're blaming China. And the blaming is not new, but the implications could be hard, because now it's not just a deficit in trade. Now the United States are going to be having, I don't know, anything between 100,000 people dead and higher. Today's 58,000, I think, as we speak. And that could change a lot, because now if you start blaming and you start actually trying to get compensation, and if some other countries in Europe fall into that discussion also, I think trade is going to be suffering for quite a while, until the new supply chain that we speak of at the beginning could be established. But that's going to take time. I mean, you cannot take a production from one country and just move it overnight to a different one. It's going to take some time. I think, and I know I might be politically wrong on this, Tiago, but you asked me, I think we're seeing a change in the leadership. I think the United States is not longer going to be considered a leader of the, you can call it free world, or the West world, or whatever. I think new players will have to take that. Would it be China with this president? Would it be some country in Germany, in Europe, like Germany? I don't know. That's very hard for me to try to imagine. But what I can envision is a change. I would think also, Tiago, that it would depend on what's the consumption rate that as consumers we're gonna be experimenting after we get back to some kind of normal. I mean, are we as a society be willing to spend a lot on things like clothing, entertainment? I don't know. Something in my mind tells me that probably our concept of heroes or idols, either in sports or in music or whatever, is going to change, because people is going to be realizing that there are some other activities that are far more important. And I know I'm politically wrong on this, but that's just my take on it. So, and there is another piece of the puzzle, and that's automation. I mean, we've been talking for years now about robotic process automation and robots on the production side, and I think that's gonna change. And I mean, that's gonna accelerate. I think some companies will actually consider using what's called RPA, robotic process automation, or actual robots as part of their operation. It's safer, it's less expensive. They don't get sick from the production point of view. Of course, if there is no demand, what do you need to produce? But in a world that is getting back to some kind of normal production, I see increment in the processes that are going to be automated, and that could be good because efficiency and production and productivity is going to go high, but the high cost of that is unemployment. And right now, unemployment is the most critical part of the equation. I don't know what are the figures in Brazil, Tiago, but
Hi.
here they're in Central America, in Costa Rica, they're talking about 20-25% unemployment.
Yeah, we were already struggling with unemployment the last 2-3 years, and now things are, of course, a little bit harder. I was exactly as you were speaking about the automation and the increasing in automation, I was thinking about unemployment, because there is maybe a paradox or a contradiction. When you think about the productivity of countries, we need to improve, and in a faster pace, we need to improve our productivity. And of course, technology, automation is a way. But meanwhile, especially in this moment, the rates of unemployment are amazing. In the United States, for example, I can see, I think today is 26 million people asking for assistance.
Yeah.
Maybe they can recover much faster than we in Latin America, but this is something that worries a lot. And when you were speaking about this, the balance of power in geopolitics is something hard to visualize. But coming back to international trade, I think it's weird because the supply chain, the goods, the logistics of goods, and as well as of people had decreased in a shock. But this all remote work and this growing in Zoom rooms and Hangouts and so on the other hand, may have increased the connections and the relationship we have across borders. So speaking about the digital world that goes in a different way, comparing to the logistics of goods and people. So the logistics of knowledge and data and taking the chance to invest much more in whatever technology we can in telco and softwares to foster the remote work. Maybe there is something here on this reflection on the new normal, because we can think about behavior. So that there is the different, you began the interview speaking of these three spaces, home, work, and the third space, the entertainment, and so on. I'm thinking about a changing that came to stay, not only because of productivity, but maybe because of we realize that we want to stay not only more at home with our family, but we want a different lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So it's going to have an impact on employees, and also for sure in customer behavior. So maybe the international trade that slows down with all this shock from the coronavirus, in the new normal, maybe we are going to face a different way of life, that will impact not only economy, but our social and cultural activity. Don't you think so?
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, I'm writing a column that is going to be published next week that I call it Resilience and Ethical and Change. And the question I ask is, you know what resilient is. Resilient is the ability, if you speak about mechanical engineering, it's that one material has to get back to its normal form once you have put it under big pressure. But the term resilience also can be found in psychological studies or in the biotechnology, bio world. I mean, an ecosystem has some resilience. A child that lives in the streets could have some resilience in the sense that he could get away of it and leave the drugs and hardship behind. And I was asking the question, well, what would be the normal that we want to get back to? I mean, what kind of resilience do we want to actually get back to? Because I think we must take advantage of this crisis and say, well, you know what? We used to do that, but not anymore. I mean, we need to change. I think some are clear. I mean, the environment. I mean, I think we now can all realize that we could have a much lesser impact on the climate, and we have to do it. Consumption is another one. I don't know. I gave you the examples of idols in sports. I think that we might ask ourselves, do we need to have those and put our spending and our money so these people live that kind of life? There is another concept, we call it, or experts call it, the universal wage, which was talked about, and that was giving someone, I mean, everyone a basic salary. And if you think about it, Tiago, that's what we are experiencing now. Governments are giving, at least in Costa Rica, they are giving a big, or I mean, of course, to the lower, the people that has been more affected. I think what we can do as a consultants, because there is one part that is very personal. I mean, it's more on the how you want your family to spend the money that you earn. As companies, I think we need to understand, first of all, the cycles. I mean, these crisis and this pandemic, I think we are going to be having some type of crisis like this every 5-7 years. What I mean is, once this is over, it's not that we could be safe forever. I mean, something could happen again in 5-7 years. I know it sounds very, very pessimistic, but I think that we have to learn that we are fragile as a working, productive consumption society. We are fragile, and we have to prepare for whatever is next. Hopefully, it would not be as critical as this pandemic, but I think we need to understand the implications of suffering another crisis 5-7 years from now.
Yeah, and this universal wage or the helicopter money or any bailout or assistance that we are seeing, I think today is almost $10 trillion and counting on the government assistance in the world. And the central banks, the role of the central banks may also change, because we are seeing necessity for now, but maybe it can come to stay for good. We may face much more presence from governments in economies. Don't you think it can happen?
Well, that's what I referred to at the beginning when I said that we are not quite understanding all the implications of this. Let me get back to one area that I think is I'm in a board of a institution that tries to protect childhood from abuse. Uh, if you think of the consequences of a crisis like this, when families are locked down, if a child is abused, that's the worst condition. I mean, having a family locked down with all the pressure, economic, psychological, and a child in there in the cave is is dangerous. I mean, it's and what I want to point out is that there are some implications, some ramifications of the crisis that I think we do not quite understand. Uh, I'm sure, like you and me, have spent hours in conferences and Zooming and or teaming with different digital tools, getting a lot of work. It's I mean, it takes a load. It's tiring at the end of the day. If you have had 6, 7, 8 video conferences, you feel you're tired because you are in the same environment. Probably you don't have all the conditions. So uh, I think we are not quite understanding all the implications, Tiago. So the new normal will have to be written as we go back to more relaxed conditions.
There are some implications that are going to appear in the next months.
Yeah.
Some things that are already happening today, but we can see it. So there are lots of variables, lots of issues, lots of problems that are already happening, but we can see. So
Yeah.
there are several implications that we must uh, wait for them to come up.
Yes, that's what I think. I'm not saying that you have to wait and not be ready. What I'm saying is we're not quite understanding all the implications yet. We would have to learn more as we get back to some kind of normality. Uh, and I think that the virus is going to stay with us. I mean, because not all the population has infected, so it's a matter of time. I mean, if
Do you believe in a second wave?
I do believe in a second wave. Uh, until we have a vaccine, and that's going to take, the experts anticipate, at least 12 more months. So we're going to have a second wave, I think.
Well, well, as you said, we can't wait. We must prepare, and that's why we are recording these interviews. It's really difficult to foresee what's coming, but it's a kind of a responsibility that we have as strategists to help business leaders, to help uh, public leaders, institutional organizations, startups, corporates, investors, to try to prepare for this new normal. So that's exactly why we are spending our time in these conversations. And
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, Carlos, we're coming closer to the end of this interview. We for sure can have other conversations, but for this one, I would like to ask you two final messages. One for the Latin America as a whole. What would you say in order to become better prepared for this new normal for all those Latin American leaders that are listening to us. And the second message and final one is what would you like to be? Something that you can say that you would like to be this new normal if you could choose.
Okay. Well, let me start with some reflection, Tiago. To whoever is going to be hearing or watching this interview, probably you're one of the lucky ones. I mean, you have space, you have your computer, you have your tools. You're in a position to take some time and reflect on this. That's a minority. I mean, there is a lot of people, I think we have to recognize, that cannot afford to do that. They are in a much worse situation. They either are trying to find some work or they are trying to survive. So if you're one of the lucky persons that are in a position to actually make a change, consider what you can actually do. I think that, and that's where I think we actually have an excellent framework. I mean, you have to work on today. I mean, you have to be ready to get back to work today. I mean, what do I need to do in my company in order to be ready to start producing? But at the same time, today you have to start thinking on tomorrow and a year and 2 years from now. So you need to have this kind of organization and this kind of what we call the balance model, in the sense that you cannot afford not to start creating your own future. Otherwise, I think you might lose some great opportunities. And your second question, Tiago, where would I like to be once it's over? I love to travel. I love to travel. And one of the things that I like to start doing very soon, and I know it's going to take months, is the ability to go somewhere else and learn and spend with different people, their food, their culture. That's something that I really miss, and that what I like to do.
Well, actually, me too. Maybe we can have these travels together again.
Sure.
Oh, nice, my friend. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your
No,
attention.
thank you, Tiago. It was a pleasure speaking to you. It's always is. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Stay safe, stay healthy, and let's keep in touch. Okay.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye bye, Carlos.